It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Rubbin Minds. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obiuchi, thanks a lot for joining us. Nigeria is growing up towards the change of government. May 29th is the day when a new president will be sworn in. President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu is back in the country. He's making his rounds, was in Rivers State during the week. And of course, a few highlights popped up from there. And people are starting to get a sense of what his government might look like. I believe, of course, the tribunals and the electoral petitions are still pending. A lot of controversy with regards to what should happen while we wait for that judgment. But May 29th is inevitable, and we are all waiting with bated breath to see how different things will be when a new government takes over. But I think one sector of the economy that a lot of people are hoping continues to stay strong or stand even stronger is the press. And we're going to be talking about freedom of the press today and how they shape a future of rights, just generally what Nigeria should look like going forward, and the power of the press. I'm joined here now by Mayowa Tijani, who's editor-at-large at The Cable. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
If you were going to look back in the last 8 years at how the press in Nigeria has fared, you know, there's a lot of people who have accused the press of not doing enough to hold government accountable. We've also seen where Nigeria ranks with regards to press freedom. So I guess on both ends, maybe there's some responsibility to be taken. What have the last 8 years been like?
Well, I think a lot has changed in the landscape over the last 8 years. The ranking in Nigeria has, of course, gone a lot lower and lower. Out of 180 countries, we're around 120. We've been dancing around 123, 129, within that bracket. And basically, it shows that we are not making a lot of progress when it comes to press freedom. There is a responsibility on journalists, quite all right, but there's also a responsibility on the rest of the system. Now, there are 4 key factors that fit into how we measure press freedom. One of them is social, economic, political, and legal. Now, the legal framework, with the way the judiciary is within the country, the social, right, this particular year, Nigeria improved over last year, but there was a drop in one of our indices, and that's the social factor. And this has to do with, if you report a certain kind of story, the people, not necessarily now the government, not necessarily now the economic factor, but the social factor of that kind of story that you're reporting. Of course, that links back to the politics of it, but I think that we've not done really well over the last 8 years.
Yeah. I mean, the press here has been accused of having a culture, you know, of the brown envelope. And right. I think it's something that people don't like to discuss openly, but it is a thing.
Yeah.
And most people have tied that to how the press works here with regards to, you know, investigations, putting out stories on individuals or politicians. When you have concrete facts, or there's an expose on somebody, yeah, what you decide to report, or sometimes even how you decide to report it, you know, and it looks like something that has become a culture. Right. A few organizations, you know, especially with the emergence of the digital media, are starting to look a little different. You know, we hear about people who get funding internationally, so they're not tied to anybody's purses. But it's still sort of pervasive across the country, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still a big problem. Now, one of the things I say this regularly, that a lot of talents are leaving the media for, say, public relations, say, politics, because of economic reasons. And yes, the brown envelope problem is there. If we do not find an alternative means of funding the press in Nigeria, it's going to be a big problem going into the future, and is not going to be solved. Because finances, economic, of course, like I said earlier, economic reasons is also one of the reasons press freedom is sort of stifled. There are stories that you see today that a certain newspaper would report, especially digital media, and a lot of traditional media houses cannot touch that story for economic reasons. And that economic reason, maybe adverts, maybe direct sponsorship within, partnership within some companies, some persons, and the news organization. So this is still a big problem. If we don't find alternative business models that can run some of these things. The first investigative stories I did, 2017, there was a particular attack in Maiduguri. I had to go there and all of that. Now, one of the challenges was funds. Now, I can say I want to go into some hinterland, some difficult places, hard to reach. If I don't have the funding to execute that kind of story, it's just going to be a good idea that is never going to become a public story.
Yeah. Let's go to, we have another guest, Fola, who's joining us online. Fola, if you can hear me. Let's touch a bit on, more recent events, the elections, We did have what many people have called a pandemic of fake news, of misinformation, of disinformation. It was so much that it became almost hard to know what was real and what wasn't, Even sometimes you had what you called reputable media organizations who put out things and then had to retract or delete, or correct. That happened so many times, and it made... And across the world, maybe not just in Nigeria, there's become this narrative about trust for the media. And it feels like Nigeria has gotten caught in that web very strongly. Do you agree or not?
Yes, I actually do agree. We do have a trust problem in Nigeria with the Nigerian media. And one of the reasons we have a trust problem is media ownership. If you look across, the span of the traditional media in Nigeria, both print and broadcast, you find out that ownership of the media majorly lies within a certain circle. That means people who are in one way or the other connected, to government, to politics. And we run a media that is wholly backed by political patronage. So, of course, there's going to be a trust deficit, especially when such patronage decides what goes on in the newsroom, what goes on, what editorial decisions are made. So once the public begins to realize that, the information that they're being fed is being manipulated and directed by media ownership, who is backed by political power, they're definitely going to be a little bit suspicious. And then this also lies even within the media space ourselves. We do need to, look inward and find out what is going wrong. And it's not very far-fetched. I'm very glad that my colleague from the cable talked about funding. Funding is one of the major problems that is impeding press freedom in Nigeria. When you have a situation where, media organizations cannot properly fund themselves independently and they have to go back to the paymasters who have a vested interest, then it becomes a problem. Then, you have to pick and choose which stories to cover and how to cover it and which angles to go or not. So if we're going to build trust, one of the things we need to do in the Nigerian media space is, one, find alternative funding, and two, check ourselves, check our vested, or let me say, check our biases, our innate biases, and how we put ourselves in positions where when our credibility is not questioned, our integrity is not questioned.
Yeah. I want to ask you, and I want this to both of you, but let me start with you, Fola. It's a very interesting sort of move that the media, especially in America, has made now, where you sort of watch a news network and you know where they sort of stand politically. It's sort of become the brand of news coverage in America. But we've started seeing that sit here, not with the media houses, but with allegations from politicians, from people in government. So it's almost as if you do a segment or something that criticizes government or a politician or a political party, you're automatically branded as someone who's paid by the other or in opposition to whatever it is. As a journalist in Nigeria now, how do you navigate, a situation where you're able to, give out proper information, give out facts, criticize who or what needs to be criticized, and still not be seen as biased? Is that possible? Or are we now going down that rabbit hole where, the United States has found themselves now?
So it's going to be very hard to not be seen as biased by any party who's aggrieved by the stories that you cover. So if your story benefits one party and doesn't benefit the other party will find a way to call you biased. But the thing is, the laws that back Nigeria's media industry, I am from the broadcast industry, and I'll tell you that the laws, that govern the way we practice does not allow, media to be leaning towards a particular position or not. Yes, it happens in America. Unfortunately, we're not there yet. Maybe if we do have such democracy within the media industry, maybe everybody will face the media that speaks to their biases. I don't know if that's going to be positive or not. But as it is right now, what we should be doing is speaking the truth. Stay with the facts, make your reports accurate, credible, and balanced, and you cannot escape being called biased by the party who is hurt by that particular report. But if our report was placed on the courts and peer reviewed and peer examined, will it be found wanting? If your report is balanced and credible and accurate, and it can be fact checked and reviewed and found to be, in accordance with the standards, then anybody can say you're biased or not. You've done your job.
Yeah. I'll come back to you, Fola, but I'm sure you got the question, but
yes.
Away from even the politicians, you find people who are now supporters. I mean, if you go on social media sometimes, if they see a news article from a digital media organization or a broadcast media organization, they immediately believe, because of a narrative that's been formed over time, whether it's factual or not, it's becoming very, very strong.
Yes. Actually, for this election, we actually got closer to what the United States has right now than we did maybe from previous election. One of the things is clear that there are certain people, and of course, all over social media, when you want to read stories that favor a certain political party, you go to this place. When you want to watch something about this, another political party, you go to this place. And of course, for some of them, it's clear. So I won't mention names, but a certain TV station, is owned by a politician. They would run the reports in a certain way with a certain slant. We had the particular challenge. There was a fact check that was done about a particular political party. And we had partnerships with some organizations in the north. So we shared with them, okay, share with your audiences and all of that. One of the things they said to us immediately was that we cannot share this. And we're like, it's a fact check. Everything is there. And they said, no, it would be as if we were paid by this particular party. And so in that kind of instance, we then do a fact check that cannot be shared in a certain region of the country because of that existing bias. So I think that the way we are going, we may not be able to avoid it into the future. There are a few people, right now, three top TV channels. One is quote unquote on the right, one is on the left, and one is in the middle.
Smells like America.
Yeah, exactly. We are closer to America than we have ever been.
Yeah, but is that a good thing, though? Is there no danger in that? Because even with America, you find people who are, like she said, are just stuck with who tells them what they think they want to hear or what they believe, and you just keep going down this rabbit hole.
Yeah. So there's a lot of problem around that, and that's where media literacy comes in. So if the people in America, they have like a spectrum. If you are to the left, these are the guys on the left. If you are to the right, these are the guys there. So if we had that kind of media literacy in Nigeria, if there's a story about a certain political party, if you want to hear what suits your ego, you know where to go to. If you want to hear the counter story, which you can then add up with what you heard the first time to sort of balance things out, then you know where to look at, what to read, what to watch. So that media literacy is important, and it's one of the things that we have to basically commit a lot more effort into going into the future.
Let me come to you, Fola, now, switching up completely. I want to talk freedom of information. It was a law that was supposed to change the landscape of, how much access Nigerians have to government and just policy and the way government works. It's been a number of years now. How would you rate access to information? A lot of people say they try to file some of these things. Sometimes you get what you ask for, sometimes you don't. And sometimes when you even do, it takes years or months. And by the time you get the information, it's no longer important, Has that helped journalists, you think?
Off the top of my head, I'll say at this point, not very well. It hasn't. Because we have the Freedom of Information Act that is supposed to, open the books. But right now, it hasn't really been doing much because there's still a wide gap in the process between filing and requesting and between getting the actual information that you need for reports or for accountability. We're still not there. So it's not a very long answer, Ibuka. I'm just going to say that freedom of information is one of the pillars of a free press. If we're really, really, going to have a democratic press, a free media, then the freedom of information is a fundamental right that we must have as the media. But unfortunately, in Nigeria, we're still at that place where you're still getting a lot of runaround, from government agencies, from people who are supposed to be accountable. And this is This is holding us back. So if we cannot get the information that we need, then we're still going to come back here to talk about press freedom next year.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that, and I mean, we started off the show talking about the ranking of Nigeria with regards to freedom of press or press freedom.
Yeah.
When you look at that, and also, like I said, the sentiment of a lot of Nigerians, especially with what social media has democratized now, where there's sort of a belief that the press hasn't done enough to hold government accountable over the years. Do you think that's a failure on the part of media, or do you think government has not given enough room for the press to thrive?
I'll say both, a little bit of both. Unfortunately, we live in a country where, like I talked about media ownership earlier, I also talked about how difficult it is sometimes to separate, vested interest, advertising funds from editorial decision making. But then digital media is here. And one of the blessings, if I can use that word, of having digital platforms is we now have independent media platforms who can now report and who can now be free of some constraints that traditional media, have been having. But then again, because some of these digital platforms are operating within the Nigerian space, it can still be a very, very dangerous thing to do for them. Journalists are still getting arrested. Digital journalists are still getting picked up and detained without trial, without rhyme or reason. So yes, we do have the government factor, we have the funding factor. We also have a capacity problem. I'm very glad when Muyiwa talked about, doing a fact check and then, sending it to some of their partners up north, and then it was rejected. We have a capacity problem. We still have a very low number of fact checkers, people who can explain, people who can, people who can investigate and who can fact check government claims and information and relate it in such a way that it will be digestible by the average person. We have that problem, and until that is so, until we begin to build capacity within ourselves and work together. So we also don't have a lot of collaboration between media organizations in Nigeria, digital media, traditional media. Once we begin to collaborate and work together, we'll be able to scale some walls, but still that government factor needs to be addressed.
All right, Muyiwa, your organization is one of those that have sort of moved away from what is called traditional media. You're a digital media organization. May 29th is almost here. Let's look into the future now. I don't know what your thoughts are on what's to come. We'll have a new president-elect. Yeah. He has a bit of a track record in Lagos State to look back at with how he treated the press when he was here. We had a few years ago when Twitter was banned, for example, so it goes back to what she's saying. Even in the digital space, government still does have a tough arm there. What are your expectations coming?
Okay, so let me premise this answer with part of the problems we're dealing with. And this is, whatever I say now about this is going to align somewhere or the other. Yeah. So if I say that we are going to have a better press, they would say there's corn in my pocket. If I say we are going to have a worse media, they would say I'm on the obedient side. Yeah. But the reality is that from the record in Lagos State, and maybe from okay, let me just use the record in Lagos State to start with. Lagos State is one of the closed states that we have in the country. Write 1,000 FOIs about the funding, spending, and all of that of Lagos State. You are not going to get anything that is going to be helpful. So if we scale that to the federal level, we would have a problem. But there's also that little hope that, okay, this particular government is sort of invested in the media. So the candidate is known to have a newspaper, have a TV station, have a... So maybe there will be some relationship with the media, or maybe that arm of his life, quote and unquote, would then become more like the official channel of government business. So we can't particularly say that this is what is going to happen, but yeah, we are here with bated breath.
I think I completely agree with you. We're just going to have to wait and see how things turn out. I mean, we can only hope for the best. And I think we all need a free press for Nigeria to thrive. Thanks a lot, Muyiwa. Thanks a lot, Fola, for joining us. All right, welcome back. if you're just joining us, you're watching us right here on Rubbin Minds. Of course, Olufemi Bisoye joining us right from our Abuja studios. Can you hear me? How are you doing? Olufemi, can you hear me?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, very well.
Good afternoon, everybody. I can hear you.
All right, awesome. Want to talk to the 10th Assembly, which is coming. We're still at least about a month away from the 10th Assembly being inaugurated, but there's already so much drama that's been thrown up, especially with regards to the principal officers. So many names have been thrown into the hat. We're hearing of Senator Jules Okalu, Senator Sani Musa, Senator Godswill Akpabio, Senator Dave Umahi, Senator Osita Izuna. So many of these names have been thrown into the hat. But we started hearing talks about a consensus candidate for the APC, that Akpabio might be the one, but nothing is confirmed yet. We've also heard talks about, all the opposition parties trying to come together to pitch a candidate. Are you surprised at how sort of intense already the drama has gotten when we've not even inaugurated the president yet?
Well, it is expected, because if you look at the build-up towards the APC primary, it was also intense. So, and a lot of people are saying the equity and the level playing ground that occurred during the primary should also be allowed to occur during the 10th Assembly, most especially the Senate election. And of course, we cannot deny the fact that maybe people are beginning to see that for us to have a progressive Nigeria, the legislative arm of the government is very, very important, and they play a crucial role. And this is why we've seen people of capacity, so to say, have shown interest. In as much as, we looked at it like some people showing interest from other regions or of the country, which it shouldn't be. But then, since it is an election, it has to be open for everyone to show interest. However, we also, as general public, as Nigerians, we need to also monitor the situation of things, how it's going, and of course, let them understand that we are also interested not just in who becomes the commander-in-chief, but also who becomes the number 3 citizen of the country.
So there's a lot of talk about the zoning of that particular position. Many people have said the Southeast needs to get it because, the two other major tribes have occupied the presidential and vice presidential positions. But then, of course, there's the South-South candidates who are saying, well, it should just come to the South, and whoever from the South should get it. Do you think that's going to be a huge factor? And is it going to be a bit of a problem for the Southeast candidates? I think there's just about 2 or 3 senators from the Southeast, giving the numbers that they will be needing to push for such an agenda.
I think it's a big factor, and of course, we need to also understand that Nigeria is a multi-ethnic and multi-religious society, and things have to be balanced. We've already had the president from the South and the vice president from the North. Specifically, we have the president from the South, from the Southwest. We've got a Muslim president and, of course, a Muslim vice president. So for equity, fairness, and balance, understanding the fact that coming from the 2023 general election, the polity has been heated along religious and ethnic line. We've seen some candidates playing the ethnic and religious cards. You understand? So it is important we balance it by making sure the number 3 citizen of the country, which is the Senate presidency, goes to a Christian South. A Christian South, so that we can have a balance, so that the Christian faith, we've seen pastors come out during Sunday services saying things that they are not supposed to say. So, but then when they now feel that, okay, we have not been involved, we now have one of us who is now the number 3 citizen, one of the most important decisions in the country, I think that withdraws this tension. And of course, if you looked at it, like I always tell people, politics is not by emotion. Politics, it's about data, it's about fact. It's about, how will I put it? When it comes to anything political, you throw emotion away and you bring in the fact and who will be loyal to you. What do I mean by that? If you look at the last presidential election, from the southern region, the Southwest had the highest number of votes. And the zone with the highest number of votes is the South-South. And of course, the South-South, they have candidates for the Senate who have shown that they have capacity to make it happen. And if you looked at, since the fourth assembly, we've had up to 9 Senate presidents. And out of these 9 Senate presidents, the Southeast, they've gotten like 6 out of it. And there's a region who has brought in almost 1 million votes. There's a region in this last election, in fact, a particular state from the region brought up to 240,000 votes, higher than all the Southeast combined. So if we zone, or however, or say micro-zone the Senate president to that particular zone, I think the presidency or the All Progressive Party or All Progressive Congress, it will be fair enough. Let me just put it that way, it will be fair enough.
Now, so another very interesting race that's also definitely going on is that of the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And a candidate has raised a lot of eyebrows, Honorable Hassan Ado Doguwa of the APC from Kano. And he basically said that it's his turn now, almost sort of following the mantra of the president-elect, saying that he did step down for the current Speaker, Gbajabiamila, when he wanted to, or when he won it in 2019. But we all know he has a pending trial going on for alleged murder around the elections this year. And it's raised a lot of eyebrows as to whether that should not be a factor. What does that say about the entire race, about him wanting to run, about, you know, him possibly becoming speaker while that case is going on?
Okay, this is it. We have Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and we have what we also call the House Standing Rules. And I think these two important documents technically have not disenfranchised him from becoming the speaker. It is within his economic right. But then we also need to look at the moral aspect of it. You understand? Like, okay, as a country, who do we want, or probably how do we want the whole world to see the number 4th citizen of our dear country? He has the right, and like I said, I have opined some few minutes ago that the Senate presidency should be zoned to the South-South, right? And of course, that means we've got the president from the Southwest, the vice president from the Northeast, and the Senate president to the South-South. So which means we have some other regions, like the North-Central. And if you looked at it, during the presidential election, the North-Central also brought in a considerable number of votes. And of course, the Northwest, which is also coming from, he's from Kano, he's from Northwest. The Northwest brought the highest number of votes for his political party. So he has the right to throw his hat in the race. But then it is not left for our House of Representative members, those we have elected, for us to now let them understand that these are things, these are the characters, these are the attributes we want of who will become the Speaker of the 10th Assembly.
I mean, I don't know that it's very easy to make that argument, considering that it's my turn has become sort of the, the theme for this incoming government. So maybe that might just work for him. But let's talk women. We have seen a decline in 2023, which is almost heartbreaking because, I mean, most other countries are making room, you know, opening more doors for women to come into politics. But we are seeing a decline even. Just 3 female senators and 14 House of Representative members, I believe, are female in the incoming 10th Assembly. At a time when there's a lot of talk about women's rights, women need to be represented to push certain agendas and bills to support, you know, their causes. Are you worried about, you know, the shape-up of the 10th Assembly with regards to women?
Well, definitely every concerned Nigeria needs to be worried because sometimes, like I said, this 2023 election, a lot of us, we play different card which shouldn't have been, because we've seen some region giving some block vote to a particular political party, regardless of your gender, regardless of your capacity. And these are some of the things playing out. So if we really want a better Nigeria, we need to look at people based on, in as much as some political parties, they've got what we call the 35% affirmation. Even if you looked at it, how many women actually got the ticket for their political party, as in the expression of interest from the primary stage? None. And of course, you can't really impose or force them to come into the mainstream. As it's popularly said that power is not served a la carte. So we need to encourage our women to what? Show capacity. And of course, you saw what happened in Adamawa. Of course, in as much as we want women to be included in government, we want them to, you know, to come to the mainstream, to break the glass ceiling, it has to be the proper way and proper channel. You understand? But at the same time, that APC governorship candidate have shown capacity that she has what it takes to resume power. She has what it takes to govern a state. So if she, of course, tried again the next election cycle, it might be her turn. Just like we have the proverbial and the most popular Emiloko in this build-up towards 23 general election. So we are all concerned. In the Senate, we have only 3. So we need to encourage our women. Don't be afraid. You have to do it afraid. You have to get involved, and you have to show capacity, because no one will just shift away and let you say, because you are women, you should come in. No. You have to show capacity that you have what it takes to lead us, probably, you know, to represent either your district or to represent your, what's it called? Your constituency, your federal constituency at the House of Representatives. All these factors needs to be put into place. And of course, women will definitely have the chance moving forward.
Okay, let's look at the Senate now, because the House of Representatives speakership. Just to go back to that, because you had said, you know, we have a Muslim president and vice president. Is there any argument in any way for a Christian Senate president and speaker? If that argument is put forward, is this something that should maybe sort of assuage a lot of people who are sort of hurt by the way things have turned out? Does it matter that much, you think?
Well, maybe it doesn't really matter that much. If you look at those who have shown interest in the speakership of the 10th Assembly, what people are really focused on, of course, the Senate is more powerful, and of course, is senior, let me put it that way, than the House of Representatives. So when you look at those who have shown interest to become the speaker, we've got some sizable number of people from the North Central, we've got one from the Northwest, we've got some people from the, from the Northeast also. So that is open to whatever comes out from the Senate. So if the party now decides finally that we are zoning the Senate presidency to South-South, of course, automatically we have a Christian from the South-South, and APC has a ranking senator in the person of Senator Godswill Akpabio, who was a former minority leader. You know, they call him the uncommon governor and all that. So that we can now look at, okay, that of the House of Representatives, the speaker could be a Muslim or a Christian, as far as we consider other zones like the Northwest, the North Central. Those are the 2 major zones. Yes, and the Southeast. These are the 3 major zones that will now need to be considered in who becomes the Speaker of the 10th Assembly.
All right, thank you very much. I think we're all looking forward to this. I would have said, let me find out who you're placing your bets on, but I think I kind of know where your head is leaning. We're going to look forward to, I think it should be around June the 10th, or around then, that we'll be finding out the leadership of the National Assembly coming up. Thanks a lot for joining us, Olufemi Bitoye. All right, welcome back. I've been doing this show for over 10 years now, and I always talk about the fact that I feel like I come here and almost talk about the same issues every week, simply because we know how Nigeria is. It's very hard for things to sort of evolve and grow. Our issues have remained the same. Power is still a problem. Security is still a problem. You know, all of these things are still there. But the one thing I'm very proud of that has evolved in my time on this show has been the entertainment and creative industry. We've gone through years where Nigeria was doing well enough in entertainment, but we were sort of champions of our space to a point now where we're competing globally on all levels. We're talking Grammys, we're talking Oscars, we're talking the Met Gala, you know. And it's very exciting to see. We're going to be having a conversation on local content and global appeal for Nigeria. Joining me from Abuja is a co-founder inside Nollywood and lead for Big Cabal Media, Anita Boigbe. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for having me, Ebuka.
Are you as excited as I am, you know, for what's happening with entertainment? Because, you know, sometimes you get very excited, but you also wonder, are we getting too excited? Is this sort of just a flash in the pan? When you look at what's happening with the space, especially with music, you know, like I just mentioned earlier, we saw the Met Gala, which is sort of the biggest stage for fashion and sort of iconic members of the entertainment industry globally. And we had 2 Nigerians there, homegrown, you know, they're working with all the global stars. You know, do you see the Nigerian entertainment industry now here to stay? Or are you still sort of feeling that, okay, maybe this might be for a few years, let's see how this goes?
I mean, it's very interesting. I remember that I think about 10 years ago, we sort of knew that the industry was going to grow, but I don't think that we thought we were going to get here this fast. Anybody who is doubting the industry right now, I think that they're just being haters, to be very honest. In terms of the type of talent that we're seeing dominate the industry at this time, and then also when you're thinking of the kind of content that we're putting out, there's still ways to go, but essentially when you look at the way that talent has, carried the industry by itself, regardless of the kind of support or lack of thereof that they get, it's just an interesting thing to see that we're on par with what is happening globally. And I mean, it doesn't hurt now that social media is here to help.
Yeah. So I think one fear that I hear a lot of people express, sometimes legitimately, sometimes not, is, what all of this exposure now does to influence what is original to us. I mean, I saw some people sort of complaining about Burna Boy and Thames not wearing African attires, for example, to the Met Gala. I don't think that's that serious. But generally, with regards to sort of the content we put out, the lyrics, how those guys internationally start to try to meddle and, sort of water down what has made us who we are. Do you think that's a legitimate worry?
I think what people do not understand is that you start off a certain way and you don't necessarily sell out, although some people do, but you essentially try to make sure that your material, your product starts to appeal to a wide range of audiences. And so what usually happens, for instance, is just like what happens when our musicians collaborate with Latin American artists. So you find that people are saying, oh, I don't like the lyrics, I don't like the way the flow was. But in essence, it's just a thing of trying to cross over to another market. And so what happens in that sense is that you're trying to tailor your message, your craft, so that it has like the flavor of the audiences that you're trying to reach. Legitimately, we can say, oh, these are legitimate concerns in terms of we don't want people to completely lose the flavor of what we've come to know them for. But apart from that, I think that there's just a lot of grace that we need to extend to people who are trying to break out, of the continent, who are trying to have global success stories, because this means that sometimes they're going to sing what you don't want to hear. Sometimes they're going to have films that you don't want to watch. But then those things travel well in terms of, what the other audiences in other markets want to see. I think what we want to push for, essentially, is balance. We want people to be able to, balance the flavors that have made them, household names in their countries, in Nigeria, for instance. And then at the same time, they have elements that make them sellable in these places without losing the essence of themselves.
Yeah, let's talk Nollywood now, which I know is your actual forte, because it sort of took longer for Nollywood. They started this run even before the music industry did. It looked like it took them a while, but it looks like now things are starting to look very exciting. Yes, the content sort of distribution space has been democratized because of all the streaming platforms that have appeared everywhere now. And we're seeing Nollywood getting some attention now away from the traditional spaces of the African continent and maybe a few Caribbean countries, so that also impacts on quality. And it's very exciting to see what this brings. But there's also the talk about, are we ready, for this sort of global attention that Nollywood should be getting now? Do you think we are there?
So I think it's a case of the spotlight coming before we had time to mature. So we have democratized the space. I mean, with streaming, with people being able to have their films travel. But essentially, because that came on too soon, a little too soon, before we could develop our structures, we could learn better business models. What you can see is that our films are traveling quite all right, but you still have like fear. Personally, for me, like every time there's a new project coming out, I know that they are going to, depending on the platform they eventually choose, they are going to, extend beyond the shores of Nigeria. But the fear still stands there within to say, what does this content look like? Are we getting the chance to travel with our content without actually just fine-tuning what it is we're selling? Nollywood has come far. But I just wish that perhaps we could do a sort of multiverse thing where we were building our industry and building the structures better to a point where we don't have to be afraid as much every time we have to export something. But all in all, we have people who are trying to, like, get ahead of the curve. We have people who are trying to learn and just travel and learn how to do things better. But it's a work in progress. I do think the music industry, sort of, it has been easier for them to do this, to improve their quality level at the same time that distribution and all that others are improving. But for film, it's a touch and go thing. We are happy for the growth, but at the same time, I don't know, Ebuka, you too, if you have those fears, you're just afraid sometimes about the kind of quality that you're going to see on these platforms.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And I mean, I think the difference between music and movies, movies are way more technical. It involves a number of people. It takes months to put something out. You find sometimes an artist tells you, oh, I made this hit song in 10 minutes in the studio. You can't really do that with the film that you want to, have quality. So which brings me to the question of, what should we be doing now? Because the streaming guys are here, they're not leaving, and they've seen that at least some of these movies are working or some of these series are working. I always hear the talk of Nigeria, stories are not the problem, is the output or the technicality of it, How do we start to bridge that deficit? Because the world has started paying attention. We saw what happened with Gangs of Lagos, for example. That has sort of shifted the narrative even for me, because we all knew they were paying attention, but this felt a little different, and it feels like anybody trying to do anything now has to be just a little more serious. What sort of things should, filmmakers or people in the industry be thinking now?
Yeah, I think it has to do with attention to detail and just process. And again, just a lot of business education has to happen within this space. So we've gone from a place where maybe one person, one distributor had monopoly to now this stage where you have you have options now. And really what you want to do is that you want to think and strategize about the best ways to, utilize these options. And that's where the process and just general education come in. Stories, Nigerians have abundance of stories in terms of, if you walk down the street now and ask people random things, you would get stories. But it's in the development of those stories. We don't spend a lot of time developing our stories. And so for the things that you mentioned, for instance, Gangs of Lagos, it took a long time for that movie to be made. And you find that the things that eventually travel well, you see that a lot of time was spent to develop it from story stage down to production. We don't spend a lot of time with story. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about all the elements and how we want to excite or delight the audience, across, all the acts of the film. So there's just that on one hand. On the other hand, you just have a lot of people scraping by and trying to make do with what they have. So it's a little tricky to blame, because you know that there's a lot of struggle involved in making the industry work where it currently is. And just brings me to my first point of saying we needed more time to build structures, but we can still build them now. If we fix our processes, especially seeing how stories go from ideas to production, and then we have, a clear sense of how we want to build the business part of the industry, what happens is that people start developing these things as actual products, not just in terms of, oh, I carried the camera to Yaba and I started shooting something. Just building it as an actual product because you want it to travel. You're thinking of what the IP means, in terms of returns and in terms of ripple effect across the industry. So there's work to do, but it just all boils down to attention to detail and what the end goal is at the end of the day.
Yeah, a very valid point you made there about, how hard generally it is just to get anything done in Nigeria. It's very true, which is why sometimes I, for one, struggle between, being a critic of work and also understanding that it's important to also give them their flowers, because it is tough here. But speaking of giving them their flowers, let's talk about the AMVCAs now. It's upon us again. It's our biggest, movie awards. A lot of very competitive categories. New categories were also added on this year, so it's a much bigger event this year. When you saw the nominations, were you excited with what you saw? I mean, a lot of people have talked about a few misses maybe here and there, but generally, was that a reflection of what the industry has looked like before this year?
The AMVCs this year has been interesting. I think we had to do like a long spotlight on it at Inside Nollywood. I wasn't surprised. I think what it was, I couldn't see how much it had grown as an award, really. So when AMVCs first came out, there was so much like buzz about it because it meant that there was something that we could look forward to. There were too many people in the categories. There are too many people in the categories. Like there's so much that's going on that just you kind of know where some things are going to tilt at the end of the day. But overall, I think that what it signals for us is that beyond just African Magic and MultiChoice having this as a platform to showcase their films, and we do need an award ceremony that highlights the industry at the end of the year. But we need more. So the MVCs today, it works. The name covers it. So whenever you want to even get angry, you remember that the name is Viewers' Choice Awards. So it works. The popularity play around it works. Everything else works because there's a name brand that covers it. But in terms of what an award should mean for the industry, to spur an industry to be better, I think we need one more, two more that hold the same level of prestige. But as this is, I don't think there were any surprises for me, except there was a project that got, I think, a lot of nominations, and the lead in that project did not get a nomination. And everybody just went on like it didn't mean anything. And that was, it was a little silly to see because, so I think that was the biggest shocker for me. And what else? I enjoy that now there's just more recognition for non-acting categories. So that's something to be happy about.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But I mean, you mentioned so many people, and it was also a struggle I had even with the Academy Awards. When you watch the Academy Awards now, you see some categories with 10 nominees or 7 nominees. I'm not sure what's happening. Is it that too many good films have been done? But I guess that's also reflecting on the AMVCAs. And yes, whether we like it or not, Nollywood also now has better projects, might not be much better than they used to be, but at least they're better than they were. And maybe that is also reflecting. And remember, this is not just a Nigerian award, but I definitely agree with you on the fact that we might need more of this sort of platforms. But it requires money. And I always wonder, Nollywood needs money. Who's now going to invest in the awards if the movies are not even getting the money that they need?
That's a tough question every time. Because, I mean, you hear it, or you see, you're looking at the movie and you can tell exactly where the money finished. And so government is there. I personally do not think that the government is doing enough in terms of spotlighting. But I also think that the industry itself has not been able to, players in the industry have not been able to sell themselves in terms of, how this is a product that has to yield return on investment. A few people have been able to do this properly, and so you can see the King of Boys, you can see the Gangs of Lagos, and you just look through like the executive producer list, and you see that work is being done. But essentially, you find that in the selling of these films and in the way that these films are presented, you can clearly see value as a person who wants to invest in a film, but you can't say the case for 90% of the other things that come out. So when people are putting money in things, like they want to know why they're putting money in things. And that's why government's always the first go-to. You want the government to actually set up structures where people can lend and then just lower the barrier of entry for people who actually want to make good stuff. But also we need more private investors to set up funds, funds basically set aside for things like this. It's difficult because it's very hard to quantify the ROI of any entertainment project, but we really need more people, the way we've done for tech, the way we've done for the music industry. We need more people to take chances on the industry, and set up funds for these things. Everyone should see it as a long-term investment in terms of when you look at the way industries perform across the world. You look at Disney, for instance. So it gives some sort of overview of what you should expect at the end of the day somehow. So in terms of who should invest, government definitely needs to be doing more. And then we need private companies, we need people with money to actually set up structures for funding the industry.
All right, before we go now very quickly, not to drag you into politics, but we have a new government coming in. You've talked a lot about government there. When you look at where Nollywood is at, you know, where it's going, all of the streaming platforms are here, but we're still talking about the money conversations and the studios not being available. Davido had a great concert at TBS the other day, but there's also conversations about the fact that we don't have enough concert spaces across the country and all of that. Are these things government should be thinking about? What do you think the new government can do? Are you hopeful even?
It's a tricky question, if I'm hopeful. I don't know if I'm hopeful for it. I don't know that in terms of what government should do, we really want to set up a system where creatives... So I don't know, like you're watching a film and you see that it's sponsored by, say, a state government in the US. And we really want the government to take two things. Number one, we need the government to set up a system where filmmakers can go, submit their decks and describe the IP, describe how the IP is like, affecting or just going to yield returns at the end of the day. And then there's a system that does not require them to give an arm and a leg to get the money and, just go. I know something currently exists, but it's just so exhausting to go through. And I feel like we need to simplify that process. The second thing is that we actually need government to provide infrastructure support. Like people need to be able to own studios. They need land for that. People need to also be able to travel across the country to film. One of the reasons why the audience is always shouting that our stories are very Lagos-centered is that it is difficult to film in places that you cannot travel to.
Okay, Anita, sorry.
Even in Lagos that we have to film a lot of our stuff, you find that they're just a lot that we need to think of. So for me, those are the areas that we need to focus on.
Thank you very much, Anita. So very sorry to cut you short, but we run out of time, and I think your points are very, very valid. Hopefully, May 29th breathes some more fresh air into the entire entertainment industry. Thanks a lot for joining us today. All right, and thanks, of course, to our viewers. Like I always say, you can follow the conversation on social media. Please use the hashtag Rubbin Minds when you send us a message. I'll see you next Sunday.